Boom, we're live. All right. Welcome back to another episode of this crazy guy who just talks about eating meat and not much else. So, anyways, flying solo tonight. Justin couldn't be here. Apparently, he thinks things like getting married, moving to a new town, starting a new job is more important than being here with me. So, you guys are just have to put up with me today. So, ah, I wanted to cover a few topics that have come up. Well, Michael Maj is here. What's up, buddy? Good to see you here. So, anyways, some of the people are new. May not know that there is a chat. You can type type messages in the chat there. See Michael Maj is in there, and 5150 Keto Warrior is in there, and I'm sure we'll have some more peeps coming rolling in soon. There's a couple other people in the viewing who aren't messaging yet or chatting yet, but anyways, one of the topics that comes up frequently, I know people message me with all kinds of stuff about autism. And there was an article not too long ago that basically they were saying that they had found an epilepsy drug, an inexpensive epilepsy drug that I don't know, reversed. I'm not sure what the best way to say it was, sort of reversed or corrected autism. Of course, we all kind of look at the statements like that with skepticism. Oh, Jules is here. What's going on? So anyways, people always, they find articles like that and they ask me about it. And I think that, because autism is a spectrum and there's all kinds of potential symptoms, that sure, you might find a drug that alleviates some of the symptoms. And there's no complete set of symptoms for every one person. It's not like all people with autism have the same set of symptoms, right? That's probably a better way to say it. So I don't know if Justin's exactly on his honeymoon, Raymond. He's in fact, he's gonna be he's flying in back to California on the 1st. He'll be at my house with his new girl. See, what day is that? Like Wednesday. So he'll be here. Maybe we'll have time for a video when he's here. Maybe we won't. So hopefully. So anyways, it'd be nice having him around again. So I almost got in trouble the other day because I said he was the best little sister I ever had, but now he's cut his hair and he's not spending copious amounts of time messing with his hair. So that joke kind of doesn't work anymore, but still funny, right? So anyways, back to the drug thing, autistic people, when you do a scan of their brain is shaped different. You can see the structures are different in the brain. So it's hard to imagine some sort of drug that's going to correct mechanical issues with a different brain structure. The wiring is, as we say, is often different. The connection, the visual cortex in the eyes maybe have a great deal more or less nerve tissue connecting them, right? Same thing with auditory and tactile sensation. A lot of the senses are often wired in a way that the pathway is greater, so the input's greater. So sensory input is often overwhelming. So that's one of the issues. So let's see. Michael Marsh says, have you heard about hydrogen enhanced water effects on ASD? Not specifically about ASD. Of course, I listened in on some of the conversations that Michael Maj has had with some of our other cohorts, like Becky Niles and Amanda Leah at, see, I got to remember the name of their group now. Fit and help me out, Michael Maj. They're on the Locals platform. So, and it's Fab Nutrition. There you go, Fab Nutrition. So, yeah, it was a drop in on their meetings and check it out. They were talking, or Michael Maj saying Fabi, Fabi. Yeah. So yeah, I've heard people talking about it. So, but not specifically about ASD, but who knows? Like I've said before, it seemed more and more like a lot of, sort of psychiatric issues are related to mitochondrial function, and almost every substance we put in our bodies affects mitochondrial function, and to some extent this can be measured, so they know what's going on. A lot of the drugs that are prescribed, they work because of how they affect mitochondrial function, maybe not like an antibiotic per se, which is, typically works like a poison to kill off, infections, but psychiatric medications, pain relievers, even sedatives and stuff like that affect mitochondrial function. So, can a drug affect mitochondrial function in a way that alleviates symptoms? Certainly, anxiety, depression, OCD type stuff, motor function, of course, um, in mitochondrial function can, increase activity in a certain area of the brain or body, or it can decrease it by, regulating it, down regulating it, or moderating it. So yeah, and I mean, nobody's too surprised when um like an epilepsy drug, which that's how epilepsy drugs work too. They affect mitochondrial function. So they essentially stop uh they stop the over stimulation or the over firing of certain nerve junctions. So when people have epileptic fits, some of the fast firing mechanisms fire unregulated. So the drugs allow or encourage the mitochondrial function that slows them down. A lot of this was covered in that great book that came out recently by Dr. Palmer. Dr. Christopher Palmer wrote the book Brain Energy. Kind of a I was probably not the title I would have picked for the book, but it's kind of overgeneralized or whatever. But um, I, I like to compare mitochondrial function in the brain to the rest of the body because it's kind of one and the same. So I think I made the reference before that, if you look at somebody who does an endurance sport like ultra marathon or cycling or whatever, these people are not particularly muscular. And you wonder, how can they produce so much energy and yet they have small muscles? And really it comes down to the concentration of mitochondria in the muscle cells. So the more mitochondria, the more energy you can produce, right? So let's see. Got to catch up on comments here. Lamb says, great to catch you live, but I have to watch the replay. It's 2:14 in Central Europe now. Have a good one. Oh, well, good. And I'm glad you popped in to say hello. Let's see. Michael Marsh says fasting, animal-based nutrition. Yeah, fasting for some people is a lifestyle. I I look at it more, for me, it's more like a lever to pull once in a while. So, but of course, you don't have to you don't have to jump into the Facebook nutrition space very long before you run into all kinds of rabid fasters, you know. So, um, let's see, both see 5150 Keto Warrior. She says fasting animal based, intuitive. Okay, so that's what FABI stands for. Gotcha. So Becky Niles and Amanda Lea's group, FABI, stands for that, for fasting animal based uh, intuition. Gotcha. Thanks for straightening that out, guys. so, anyways, uh, Christina's here. Good to see you, Christina. Hope you're feeling better. So, anyways, you know, mitochondria started out as like um, a separate organism that at some point was engulfed by a, I guess what you'd call a karyotic cell, you know, and survived in there and developed a mutual relationship, as opposed to, you know, our symbiotic relationship, as opposed to like getting an infection. The mitochondria are known widely as the producers of energy in the body, so they produce ATP in the cellular level, you know, primarily through respiration. You know, taking it's pretty interesting to get into the mechanics of it. I don't know that it's really important, but you know, there's basically this system of converting ATP um, and ADP back and forth, right? And so, like, a muscle cell doesn't have much energy on board; it needs a constant supply, you know, and the mitochondria make that. So in an athlete, like you know, an endurance athlete, they'll have high concentrations and they're not particularly muscular. So, and then that allows them to do a lot. Of course, you know, you if you're running or cycling, you need to be as light as possible to be as fast and efficient. So, as opposed to somebody who like lifts weights every day, tends to be a little bulkier. Might know some people like that. But this sort of basic understanding kind of leaves out of the conversation all the signaling that mitochondria do. They signal the nucleus of the cell. So, in the nucleus of the cells, most cells in the body have a nucleus. You know, the nuclear DNA is in there, and you know, there's signaling back and forth between the nucleus and the mitochondria, which is kind of surrounded in the cell. Um, the mitochondria have their own DNA. So it's, you hear about mitochondrial DNA that's inherited from the mother. And the nuclear DNA is a combination. So they have a relationship where they can trigger the release of neurotransmitters, the production signal, the production of proteins or mediation of proteins, and all kinds of elaborate relationship between mitochondria and the nucleus and the whole cell, the cell around it, and mitochondria elsewhere in the body. So I think what we're seeing is when you alter your diet, you know, a lot of people have come to some sort of low carb diet, whether it's carnivore or keto or um, any of the a number of ones, that another low carb diets, and they see a profound difference in, you know, one of the first things that people tend to see a difference in is their mood, you know, particularly if they're have high levels of anxiety or depression. They start to notice that improving right away. But I know for me, it was arthritis was the most drastic change for me, because it was, you know, presumably some sort of inflammatory such situation in the joints, you know, my hands, my spine, my shoulder, you know, the lower back, especially the feet. All that was, you know, very painful, very sensitive. I stopped working out for, I think it was 8 years roughly, because the pain was so intense. I'd wake up in the morning, my hands would be all clenched up, It would hurt to straighten out my hands. I'd get sciatica really bad, or I couldn't really use one of my legs. I just drag it around, couldn't roll over in bed. It was just excruciatingly painful. And, part of that could have been, oxalates in the joint. So, um, it's natural to have oxalic acid in the body, but when you have excessive amounts and the body can't get rid of it fast enough, it tends to store it in the form of crystals, tends to store it in the joints, but it can store it in muscles and even the brain sometimes. So that's one possibility. I don't know for a fact that was it, but it does cause gout-like symptoms, and that's also causes about 80% of kidney stones. So a lot of people think kidney stones are about calcium, but they're actually about things like oxalic acid building up in the body, and the body stores it in the kidney, and it sort of houses it or neutralizes it or makes it safe by mixing it with calcium. So, and I don't know how many people I've had conversations with just in the last few months about kidney stones. I know a number of people that are having problems with them. So they're very, very common. And like I said, according to the literature, 80% of those are because of oxalates. So when you eat plant-based foods that are rich in oxalates, you tend to have too high levels and you wind up with kidney stones, joint pain, and so on and so forth. But of course, there's a number of reasons why I can have joint pain. I think one of the most basic sort of issues is when you don't eat enough meat, you tend to have poor quality tissue because you just don't have the enough of the right amino acids available. And, you know, amino acids like leucine are important for building muscle. I would imagine there's another relationship like that for repairing joints. So if your joints aren't getting repaired, of course they're going to be painful. We know like fructose cross links with collagen, and collagen is one of the most important forms of protein in the body. And when you have high levels of fructose in your system, it attaches itself to the collagen, and the body's not able to repair the collagen. So that's another potential way why you might have serious joint pain. Um, so you got oxalates, you got collagen repair issues. You got just the lack of enough amino acids, proper amino acids. And I think it's pretty clear that plant-based proteins are inferior to animal-based proteins. And a lot of us do a lot better on specific types of animal proteins. Like most people on the carnivore diet will say, yeah, I do best on beef. Some people it's lamb. A lot of people it's interchangeably beef and lamb seem to be similar. Some people do really well just on pork. Quite a few people eat chicken. Most people don't feel as satisfied on chicken. So, anyways, we have that. And then, of course, when you eat a standard diet and it's rich in, omega-6 fatty acids, let's say from vegetable oils or something like that, that also tends to cause inflammation. So if you've got a damaged joint that isn't able to repair itself because it doesn't have enough amino acids, if you've got oxalates in the joint, if you've got uh, chronic inflammation that's sort of encouraged or fueled by excessive omega-6 fatty acids, you can see why you could have joint pain for all kinds of reasons. Or, and I like to say, when is it ever just one thing? I mean, if you hit your thumb with a hammer, you know why it hurts. But I think, what modern illness is it's an accumulation of contributions from being on what Bart would say is a non-species specific diet, right? So we, just to dial it back for everybody out there. Most of the people probably already heard this, but I believe that we evolved from pre-humans eating meat. I know I was having a discussion with somebody online a week or so ago, and they were saying, "Oh no, we basically came out of the trees eating fruit, and then we started eating cooked meat. Like we just jumped that gap." And I'm like, "Well, I don't." And they were talking about, we've been eating cooked meat for millions of years. And I was like, yeah, I think I covered this last week. But the accepted number for the use of fire, I think, was about 140,000 years. Um, Now there's some evidence. I was reading there's a cave in Israel, I think, where they found evidence. It looks like people were using fire there, perhaps 200,000, 300,000, maybe even 400,000 years ago. And I like to remind people that we can't just assume because one group of people in one part of the world had a technology or a food source, that everybody had it. I mean, I'm sure the use of fire would have spread fairly quickly, but people have to have contact in order, friendly contact, in order for ideas like that to move along. So it's not going to happen overnight. So, maybe you had somebody somewhere that, figured out how to control fire much sooner than someone else. But of course, without being able to control fire, how are you going to cook meat? Right. So and then when you look at all the trash pits or at the habituation sites, it's quite clear that people were eating raw meat. They're eating raw seafood, lots of shellfish and marine mammals, seals, walrus, and even people were, deep sea fishing a lot longer ago than we thought, because we find their fish hooks and their plummets and stuff like that in habituation sites where they've been buried for a very long time period of time. A lot of these habituation sites, people came and went seasonally, um, every year for thousands of years, and so their trash piled up. All the shells from the shellfish they ate, fish bones, tools they made, and it was unfathomable to think that people deep sea fishing, a lot, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. But I think they just kind of figured out, these people figured out how to make fishing line from baleen from red whales or something crazy like that. So they're taking the thread like material out of the baleen and making, um, fishing line. And they had, various people had innovated fish hooks and harpoons all over the place. And there's not a lot of, um, archaeological record for the watercraft they use, the type of boats they use, but people were quite clearly hopping along through the ocean and getting around for much farther back than we thought. And we know this because, we find their mortal remains. These people, particularly like the red ochre people, which kind of seem to be the same as the maritime archaic people. They not only we not only find their tool technology, but also their burial customs and their DNA. These were people that thrived moving along coastlines for a long time. So let's see. Let me see the comments right here. 5150 says, "That's me with chicken. You thought I was the only one. LOL." Um, the mirror people, mirror people, they're mirror peoples. I don't know what the mirror peoples are. Anyways, I'm sure she'll clarify. So, anyways, um, I people, uh, back to the meat eating, not cooking versus not cooking. Obviously, when you don't have quality access to fresh meat, it's safer to eat cooked meat for sure. And nutritionally, the lab results say that raw meat is slightly more nutritious than cooked meat, but not in a meaningful way. Oh, mermaids, gotcha. So yeah, 5150 is talking about the mermaids. Yeah. So were were we eating the mermaids? I'm just wondering. Oh, I gotcha. Mermaid is not politically correct. Hmm. Yeah, I hope we don't get canceled for saying that. So we call them mer people. Gotcha. Better to play it safe, right? So, anyways, um, when it comes to cooking meat, it really depends on how much you cook it, right? The longer you cook it, the more you denature the amino acids. So, And some people do well on really well cooked meat, and some people don't, you know. So I personally, the less cooked, the better for me. Of course, I don't go around eating raw chicken from the supermarket or anything like that. But um, I think everybody's kind of familiar with how much sushi and sashimi and raw oysters and stuff like that people eat. It's very common. But you go to countries like Ethiopia and people order raw meat at a restaurant. Of course, everybody's heard of steak tartare, and there's a whole bunch of variants of steak tartare where they're eating raw ground beef with a raw egg on top. It's a very um, common thing around the world. So both and there's a famous episode with Anthony Bourdain, No Reservations, where I think he was in Greenland and he was visiting Inuit slash Eskimo slash Native American family, and somebody brought in a seal they just killed, and they sat down on the kitchen floor and ate the whole thing raw from top to bottom, and probably 3-4 generations of one family sitting there eating the whole seal. So I don't know why that's hard for people to believe, and I'm not saying everybody's run out and eat raw meat, but we've quite clearly been doing it for as long as human beings have been here. Jules says sushi in Japan, yakho beef tartare in Korea. There you go. So yeah, people eat raw meat. And when I started eating raw meat, I started discovering all kinds of other people that ate raw meat. Like, they don't talk about it because people are put off by it, and I get it. People aren't used to it. I mean, they're used to seeing people eat sushi in a sushi restaurant, but they're not used to thinking about people eating raw beef or raw pork or whatever. And yeah, you can get parasites and stuff like that. That's another reason why we know, particularly like the Vikings ate a lot of raw meat, is because they would get roundworm and stuff like that, ropeworm from eating raw meat with a lot of parasites in it. So you find the evidence in the latrines, which is another thing that humans and prehumans left all over the place. So that's another way we know. And of course, the stable isotopes, nitrogen, I think it's nitrogen, oxygen, strontium, aluminum, stuff like that. The stable isotopes accumulate in an organism from the organisms it eats, and the scientists over at the Max Planck Institute measure these things, and they can determine from skeletal remains, teeth, and even collagen in fossils. A lot of people don't know that, but collagen can persist in a fossil for thousands of years, at least 10,000. I think somewhere around 20,000 to 40,000 years it disappears. But if you find a fossil younger than that, and you can recover the collagen from it, you can do the stable isotope testing, and you can figure out exactly what that animal, whether it be human, pre-human, or non-human animal, you can tell what their diet was made of because of the accumulation of the stable isotopes. So to me, I look at that as hard science, that tells us what we've been eating. And that's why it's no surprise to me that a meat-based diet seems to be the thing that we run best on. So our brain runs better on it. Our body runs better on it. Our body repairs itself better. And of course, the more plants tend to be heavier in carbohydrates. They tend to have different types of fats and proteins in them that we're not well adapted to eat. So of course, they're not going to run as well when we're eating a lot of that. And, when they do these surveys of what ancient communities ate, the prehistoric peoples, the heaviest plant-based diets were only about 20%. And when you go back and you find out how few edible plants there were, and people think, they go to the grocery store and they see all this produce and they think, oh, this stuff was available. And most of it wasn't available. Almost everything that's in the grocery store has been hybridized or crossbred to be less toxic, taste sweeter, and less poisonous. All of your wild potatoes are toxic to human beings. You have to detoxify them. And when you're not cooking with fire, that becomes even more and more complicated. And a lot of people know, like beans, you can't just eat most beans. They have to be detoxified. Acorns, acorns are a thing that, indigenous people ate here in the United States and probably elsewhere, but they had to go through a process of detoxifying them. So imagine trying to detoxify things before you've invented pottery and fire, and you don't have this accumulative knowledge of how to detoxify them. And why would you go to that trouble if you could just eat meat? Well, you don't. You don't until the megafauna disappear, and the megafauna started getting wiped out, say 12 to 14,000 years ago. And of course, we know that the earth is like covered with devices for capturing mammoths, mammoth traps. I'm sure they caught other large megafauna as well, but these large, slower moving animals that just weren't afraid of little people were ideal. So let's see. Jules made a comment here. Originally, most fruits we know today did not actually look like what we know today, i.e., bananas, strawberries were incredible before GMO. Oh, inedible. Sorry. Yeah. Even in the paintings that people did. So in the period of time since, the the artistic renaissance, when people started painting, painting fruit was incredibly popular for some reason. But you can see how the fruit changed just since people started oil painting. So in that short period of time, you see that the fruit got brighter in color, had fewer seeds, had more, edible meat, as it were, in the middle, and so on and so forth. So, anyways, there was a drought of edible plants in our environment. A lot of them, especially the starchy tubers, everybody likes to dust off. They also have to be detoxified, and oftentimes the effort it takes into finding them and processing them yields fewer calories than it took to acquire them and process them. So they weren't great sources of nutrition. They were probably mostly backup foods when you didn't have meat to eat. So no surprise that when we start eating meat, and the bulk of the meat were probably large ruminants like, elephant-like creatures and sloths and stuff like that. When we eat that, we tend to be healthier. Mitochondria tends to be happier, and um, it alleviates um, the physical problems as well as the mental problems, right? Or at least improves them. So, anyways, what else was on the list? There was another article I was going to cover, but don't have it in front of me for some reason. Anyways, anybody else out there got any comments they want to bring up? I'm probably covering a lot of old ground talking about why we eat meat here. There was another autism article, but I don't see it for some reason. Let's see if we can pull it up. Yeah. Must have been gotten buried. Yeah, I thought I posted it in Autistic Carnivores, but don't see it. It's a problem with having so many different kinds of social media platforms. Somebody texts you at your phone number, somebody sends it to you on Messenger, somebody sends it to you on Telegram, somebody sends it to you on Instagram. Pretty soon you can't remember where you saw them all. Oh yeah, Jules brings up the well, let's see. First of all, I missed another comment by her. Autism is said to be a metabolic disease, just like almost every neurological disease. Even cancer is considered to be a metabolic disease. Yeah, well, on the topic of autism, there was a study that was done in the last couple of years. I think it was in San Francisco, and they noticed that excuse me, the higher the hemoglobin A1C score was of the delivering mother, the more likely she was to deliver an autistic child. And of course, in MRIs, they've noticed that they can frequently see the autistic brain development in the womb. So, it frequently is something that begins in the womb. And I think the whole thing about um, the symptoms getting worse after vaccination is just related to um, uh, the immune system reaction. Most vaccines are designed to have um, they have substances in them to excite the nervous system to help it react to the the pathogen or the pseudopathogen, so that the immune system can identify whatever you're trying to inoculate against. So I think in that perhaps causes things like inflammation. If when what's the brain or the rest of the nervous system becomes um, inflamed or uh, starts swelling, that could further impair the development, right? So you got a young child that's developing, and that extra inflammation, a strong reaction or overreaction from the immune system probably contributes to that situation. And a lot of parents report that their child got a vaccination. So hopefully they'll study that so that they find vaccinations that don't elicit overreactions, or they could start testing people so they know who's going to overreact to a vaccine, because every vaccine there's a certain number of people that are injured by it, and that's why there's a vaccine court. It's not a secret. So um and then autism isn't the only condition that's affected by it. Some people get severe joint pain or develop Guillain-Barré syndrome or whatever. These are all known factors. So um as far as cancer, yeah, Thomas Seyfried did a lot of research on that. And then, of course, we look at what was it, Otto Warburg, the Warburg effect. As cells are required to develop more energy from carbohydrates, they tend to use fermentation and stuff like that more. The reactive oxygen species, or the oxidation in the cells, is higher. All of this, of course, affects and goes back to mitochondrial function, right? So eventually, I'm not saying all forms of cancer, but some forms of cancer certainly seem to be inspired by high carbohydrate diets. So once the cells are required to drive, or the mitochondria are required to drive ATP from carbohydrate sources, you have more oxidative stress. So you have more oxidative damage particularly to the DNA in the mitochondria, but quite potentially to the nuclear DNA as well. And if you get a cell that no longer responds to apoptosis, right? So the cell's supposed to self-destruct at a certain point. And when it doesn't do that, and it becomes an immortal cell, that's how you wind up with a lot of different types of cancer. And there does seem to be a clear link. Again, Otto Warburg, Tom Seyfried, a number of other people have demonstrated how some types of cancers clearly seem to be derived from metabolic disorders caused by high carbohydrate diets. So there's a lot of research out there on the subject, and of course, we're hearing more and more about oncologists using high fat diets, like a ketogenic diet, when treating certain types of patients, because people on keto and carnivore diets don't seem to suffer as much from the chemotherapy and the radiation therapy. Um, so the studies, I mean, if anybody wants to look any of this up, just go on over to PubMed. I post links like this pretty frequently. Um, uh, in on Facebook, and of course I try to remember to put them in the links for the videos as well. Um, but this is widely available. You can go over to Amazon and order Thomas Seyfried's book. I think it's just called Cancer is a Metabolic Disease is the name of it. It's kind of rare and expensive. It's like it's a hard to get book, but there's a later version that he co-wrote with somebody. But if you look it up, you'll see it in there. And I'm trying to remember the name of I read listen to a good book. Of course, Audible's a good source too. Let's go to the name of it. But anyways, there's another one about Otto Warburg's work on cell metabolism. So, anyways, yeah, agreed. I think a lot of first of all, heart attacks. A lot of people don't realize they were a new thing, started emerging around around 1900. Before that, they were scarcely mentioned in the medical literature. They basically didn't exist in the medical literature here in North America. And by the time you get to about 1940, 1950, there's like this epidemic, right? So who's surprised when we find out that it's primarily caused by diet, right? We might probably seeing the same trend with depression, anxiety, autism, and many of the other psychiatric diseases. Let's see. Jules says, my theory is that metabolic diseases actually first begins with poor enzymatic function. It starts with enzyme amylase, like as that the first enzyme in the mouth. Oh, okay. So she's hypothesizing that the enzymes contribute to metabolic disease, which could well be. I mean, we need the enzymes in order to break down our food. Of course, we could go on and on about just stomach acid. When you find out that human stomach acid is some of the most concentrated or some of the lowest pH of all the stomach acids, it points back to our origins as probably being scavengers. When we made that transition from swinging in the trees and eating fruit to walking on the land and eating animals, we were probably eating the leftovers that predators left behind. So we probably, because we had tools, we know we were cracking open bones and eating bone marrow, and we're opening the brain case and eating the brains, and probably eating a lot of muscle tissue, because a lot of predators eat the organ meats first. Anybody who's seen what coyotes do will tell you, or you just go watch the lions on YouTube eating animals. A lot of times they leave the legs behind, so they eviscerate the prey. Depends. I mean, if you got a pack of coyotes and they're all hungry and there's not enough cats around, which is the unfortunate circumstance where I live, they will, the whole animal disappear. But if there's plenty of food around, they'll just eat the organs, so. Oh, Marge is here. Hi, Marge. Thanks for coming. So anyways, us humans probably started eating meat that was left behind by predators, and that's probably one of the reasons why we have such powerful stomach acid. So you start eating food, the enzymes in your mouth start breaking down the food. It goes down your stomach. Stomach acid starts breaking it down further, then passes in the small intestine, and then of course there's a unique microbiome in the small intestine below the stomach, and then of course eventually it passes down to the large intestine, where it's different biome, and different biome in different areas too. I mean, the whole body, human body, and most animals, as far as I know, have unique biome in different parts of the body, not just the digestive tract. We have trillions of little organisms, a staggering number of mitochondria throughout our body that have this rather intricate relationship of chemical signaling, producing byproducts, exchanging um, exchanging chemical signals, neurotransmitters, all kinds of stuff. So, anyways, I think we covered pretty much everything in the topic. Um, it's cold and rainy here. I think everybody's actually having a real winter, at least in the Americas. Well, maybe not March. He lives in Miami, so it's hot and sticky there a bit. So, but the rest of us, I wonder how the mer people are doing. I wonder if they notice the weather on the surface is like. So, anyways, yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. I guess I'll wrap it up. Hopefully, Justin will be back next week. Like I said, he'll be here Wednesday, so we'll try and squeeze in a little time, do some video together. So, we'll see you guys. Don't forget to hit that like button, send links out to your friends and enemies. Let Meet Mosaic play in the background when you're at work, all that good stuff. Keep your pets entertained. Was having me rolling by the display at the store, punch up some Meat Mosaic, let it play. We can always use the numbers. Good night, Bear. Well, I see how it is. Good night, Tiger. So that's Marge, by the way. So keep in touch on Meat Mosaic Telegram group, the Meat Mosaic Facebook group. Got the Autistic Carnivores on Facebook as well. So until next time, watch lots of my videos, and I will see you guys then. Stay healthy, eat lots of meat, feel better, and whatever you do, don't fall down that carb hole.